Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and of course, that makes this episode 37 of Circles and Squares, the PlayStation podcast. Kate, how are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm officially on, half vacation. I'm still working, but I'm done school for the semester, so that means a lot of extra free time for games.
Happy half vacation. Hope you get some
Thank
good
you.
stuff to play over your time off. That's awesome. Good to hear. We're actually recording this episode a little bit earlier than usual, but the timing kind of worked out, so just stick with us for a second. Before we get into the episode today, though, I just really want to shout something out. Specifically, thank you to our friends at Loud Thumbs for having us as guests on their most recent episode. As many listeners would know, we were recently over on their show talking about Marvel, but we were on their regular video game show recently as well. Which we will leave the link to down in the description of this episode. But we were on the Loud Thumbs podcast talking with our friends Nick and Josh over there about the Steam Deck, Back for Blood beta, on our thoughts on a bunch of other stuff, including Pokemon Unite, Kate. And the reason I say this is good timing for today, if we're recording a little bit early, is that usually we don't record on Wednesdays, but today was a very special Wednesday morning in that we had the latest Pokemon Direct out, and I thought before we got into our regularly scheduled programming for the episode today, we could just talk about our thoughts of the Pokemon Direct and kind of what we thought about that just before we get into the show. So yeah, they showed a lot of stuff, Pokemon Unite related. They showed, a few of those free-to-play little games, but they also had pretty significant chunks of the Diamond Pearl remakes and some stuff about Pokemon Legends as well. So overall, what did you think of the news from today?
I'm you know me when it comes to Pokemon, I'm always a little bit reserved, just because I think I have higher expectations for the franchise than what we've gotten recently, especially with how bare bones Sword and Shield was. So I always kind of go into these things with that kind of perspective. I think the Diamond and Pearl remakes look fantastic. I know that's a really beloved generation of the games, and I know the art style has been a little controversial, but I think it looks great, and I think it looks jam-packed full of stuff, like so many things returning, like the contests and Pokemon following you around, and I think they really nailed it with that one.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with you. Just to talk about that one first, I guess. Like, I don't know what this is. We might be the only podcast on the internet that maybe has like unanimous agreement that we actually like the art style for the Diamond Pearl remakes, because people seem to just hate it. And for me, it's like, yeah, I get like there are games that look better than it. Like people like to compare it to that Link's Awakening remake from last year that has like a similar kind of chibi art style. And I agree that Link's Awakening probably looks better, but I think for what Pokemon's going for, and like I think the art style fits it well, and it almost looks like a 3D version of what the original Diamond Pearl looked like in 2D. So for me, it works really well, and I couldn't be more excited to check out those remakes. Considering Gen 4 was a pretty cool gen, I think.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's always going to be subjective. So if you're not into it, you're not into it. But I generally think, and I think since the last time we saw it too, looks like they've kind of made the art a little bit better, or up the assets a bit, so maybe that will help change people's minds. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's the biggest issue, and if that's the takeaway of the negative of it, well, there were a lot more issues with other Pokemon games.
That's true.
That's fine. But moving on to Arceus, which is probably the bigger news.
Oh, definitely.
This is where I kind of, I'm not gonna let myself get excited, because like I said, I'm going to wait till the game comes out before I pass judgment on it. But I thought the trailer was pretty impressive. I was surprised to see quite a bit of gameplay. I think that the formula that they've got going has a lot of potential. And I've got my fingers crossed that this is the Pokemon game fans have been asking for years. And looks like all the pieces are there. It just depends on how well the final product gets delivered.
Yeah, right. I'm right there with you too. I think that the last couple gens, specifically like Sun, Moon, Sword, Shield, we talked about this all in our Pokemon episode back from last year, way back when. But definitely this Pokemon now is the kind of series where it's sure, I'm a lifelong fan. I probably never won't be a fan of Pokemon. That was a great double negative. But I think with each of the games coming out, it's got to do increasingly more to win me back to be extremely excited. So I mean, if what they showed in the trailer today, if it really truly is that open, and the trainer had that dash move they were using to dodge Pokemon attacks, and it wasn't even your Pokemon dodging. It was like attacking you. Like that Ursaring was coming after the trainer, and I thought that was pretty
Oh my god,
cool.
he was terrifying. Like I can imagine some of these Pokemon being like horrific monsters. It's a cool concept, and
Yeah.
like filling out the first ever Pokedex and like starting to figure out like which Pokemon are friendly and which one are more dangerous. Like it is such a fantastic idea, and I'm a bit of a sucker for the like old time Japan setting as well. So like it checked a lot of boxes, and if this, like was its own isolated game and I wasn't thinking about the series in general, I'd probably be pretty excited for this, but I'm just not letting myself get excited and just waiting to see like what actually ends up happening.
Yeah, I'm right there with you too. And you know what I'm most excited for about this game is the people that are like lapsed Pokemon fans that maybe played, a couple games along the way, and then now they're seeing maybe they're just checking back in and they're like, holy shit, like what has Pokemon become? Like this is so much different. So I hope for those people that it turns out to be, half as cool as it ends up, as it looks so far. So yeah, exciting news to see anyway, but not exactly PlayStation related. Kate, why don't we move into the regular show proper for now? We have a bit of a different show today. We're removing the news section. There just hasn't really been a lot of PlayStation news over the last couple of weeks, so you can consider that Pokemon update the news for today. But we will be talking about a lot. Don't worry, we're starting the show off with the games we've been playing over the last couple of weeks, which is a lot, Kate. We had 3 PS Plus games to play for the show today, and damn well, yeah, we did it. We played all 3 of those, plus other games, so we got a lot of games to talk about. And then we'll take a short break, and then return with a discussion on our favorite weapons in video games. So we're going to go through our lists and chat about some of our favorite weapons, so look forward to that later in the show. Of course, we'll close out also with a listener mail question as usual. But Kate, let's start off. You went and bought Returnal, which is a game we have talked about. We talked a lot about it when it was kind of being shown off and as one of the first PS5 exclusive games that's taken advantage of the DualSense and all this stuff. So it's funny. Like I think I was the one who was probably more warm on it to start, and I was the one talking a good game about picking this up and checking it out. But lo and behold, here you are. You played Returnal, and I don't know, from what I've gathered, you've developed a new addiction. So please tell me all about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, Returnal's been a weird roller coaster for me because when I first saw it, we had the first showing of Returnal was more of just like a cinematic trailer. It didn't really show off what the game was about. And then as it went through, I had different ideas. At first I thought it was like a horror game, and then I was like, no, it's like a sci-fi space exploration game. I was like, oh, it's a shooter, and it was kind of all over the place. At least like, what I was assuming the game was going to be like. And then when it finally came out, it's like, oh, it's a, third person shooter, it's a sci-fi setting, and neither of those things really like excite me too much. But boy, was I wrong. It's like this game was made for me. So, the setting is feels a lot more Lovecraft in space than it does like a Mass Effect kind of sci-fi. It's really got that sort of like ominous, like you're in a land that you don't belong in, and there's these like unspeakable horrors and monsters and mystery. So it's really got that kind of like almost like Bloodborne kind of
Yeah,
without the gothic. But
to me, it's almost like the environment's like what if Bloodborne, but also mixed with Control.
Yes, Control I've seen a lot of comparisons to Control. That's a good one to think of. And then as far as it being a third-person shooter, it really feels more like a fast-paced action game. Like it plays more akin to a bullet hell. Like there's no chest-high walls. You're not hiding behind cover. Like you are going 100% of the time. It is intense. Like I obviously bought my PlayStation 5 for Demon's Souls, and as much as I love that game, it's not a critique on Demon's Souls. That was the reason I bought my PS5, but Returnal's the reason to play my PS5. Like this
Damn.
this is a bold claim, but this game is going to be my game of the year. And I think the only thing that could possibly shake that is if for some miracle Elden Ring gets released early.
Well, you don't think it's going to be the Diamond Pearl remakes?
Well, good luck to them. No, this game clicks with me so much. It gives me the exact kind of feeling that I get from like a FromSoft game, but it's got its own unique spins and it does all these unique things that I've just never seen before. So, I guess what it boils down to, I'm sure everybody's, aware of it, but if you were kind of confused about what it was all about, like I was at first. It's a roguelike game, and the premise, without spoiling anything, is that you crash land on this alien planet. Your ship is broken. You need to get somewhere to send a signal back to your people. Basically, you're trying to escape where you've ended up. But the second you got out of your ship, and just as you're about to explore, you come across a dead body that turns out to be your body. And along with these corpses of yourself that you keep finding audio logs that you've recorded. And basically, and how it ties into being a roguelike is every time you die, you almost like Groundhog Day back at your ship crash, and you're just stuck in this loop, and you have no idea what's going on, what's causing it. And so it starts off with this like really neat mystery. The voice acting's great, it sells it right away. The atmosphere is so ominous. And so right immediately I'm on board. Like, this is messed up. What is happening? How do I get off this planet? Is it even possible? Like, and your voice logs are like, they're kind of telling you certain things that are going to happen, but they're also like, she's clearly freaking out and has been doing this for quite some time before you as the player jump in.
Oh, I was going to ask you about that. Like, do you experience the crash, or does it kind of just put you in there like when she's already going?
So you experience the crash. So the initial cutscene when you get in, and then every time you die and restart a run, it plays the crash happening. So you go through that over and over and over again. And then you start out. You always have your basic pistol that you start with, and then there are various things, almost kind of like a Metroidvania, that you pick up as you go that give you like permanent upgrades or permanent abilities. So some of them are like movement related. One that you get early on, I won't spoil anymore, but one you get early on is like a sword that you can use for a melee option. And so you run through the game, and you pick up like, you can pick up various like different weapons and stuff as you go, and different like augments to your suit, different buffs and debuffs. And that's kind of like the roguelike element. So each run you have a bit of a different load and like a different like build for your character, and you're trying to get as far as you can. Like, there's different, I think there's like 6 or 7 different biomes. I've made it to the second one by now, which is still pretty early in the game. But you have to beat the first boss to get there, and he is no joke.
I've heard their bosses in that game can be tough.
This boss kicked my ass. I went in the first time, I was like, oh yeah, I got him. Oh no, he's got a phase 2. Okay, I died. Go back in, like, yes, I got him. Oh, there's a phase 3.
Like, fuck.
So it really felt, it was one of those things that most of the progression in this game, it's not like Hades where you have like different, or some of the roguelikes where you have different stat points and your character gets stronger. You get better by having more access to different items and things that you unlock through each run. And there's the Metroidvania kind of upgrades too. There's a few of them. But the vast majority of the progression in this game is you just figure it out and get better as a player, which really appeals to me. And it's kind of the same sort of like Dark Souls or like Bloodborne formula, where you go in and you fight the boss 20 times. Then eventually you're like, you go from being, this is going to be impossible, how I'm ever going to beat this guy, to, okay, I figured it out. Like, I feel pretty comfortable fighting him now.
That's cool. I was gonna ask, like, before we get past that, you just brought up Hades. Like, do you think that, like, one of the things that I love so much about Hades is how it justifies why you're repeating the same loop over and over, and how it evolves that roguelike kind of genre from just doing runs to like justifying story-wise why. And like, do you think Returnal, like, you obviously haven't beaten it yet, but story-wise, does it do a good job, like in the same vein as Hades, is justifying multiple runs, or does it feel kind of like this is a tacked on thing to just try and copy that kind of type of idea?
No, so far I feel like it's really integral to the game, at least so far. The difference I would say with Hades is, it's kind of like you're progressing through a story as you go, and you're building relationships, whereas Returnal feels a lot more like you're trying to uncover this mystery. And with each run, you get like that little bit closer. Like, maybe you find one more audio log, or getting to the next biome, like, answers and raises some new questions. So I think it's really smart. I think it works obviously as a game mechanic, and as a justification as to why you keep replaying things over and over again. But I think it's also enough of a hook that, I know some of the problems that people have with roguelikes, and I've experienced it with certain games too, is they start to feel very repetitive, because you're fighting the same enemy over and over again. You're fighting through the same levels. And it becomes very similar each time. But with this game, I feel like the mystery is enough that I'm really interested to keep going. And it also is nice in the way where if you want to go on and skip the first biome or biomes you've already completed, you can. So now that I have the second one unlocked, I beat the first boss, I can go to the second area. I can skip that first one if I want to and just focus on playing the second. And that's kind of a nice like choice that the player gets to make. I feel a lot of this game has very smart risk reward mechanics. So that's one of them. You can skip to new areas and just be a little bit quicker and focus on learning how the enemies in that area works. But if you do skip the first area, then you kind of feel a little bit undergeared because you haven't had all of that time to pick up new weapons or to pick up various like upgrades for your suit and stuff like that. So I think it's good at making the player kind of choose, like, am I going to go into that side room that isn't necessary, but like I might get something worthwhile out of it, or am I just going to press on because like I might just lose health and it might not be worth it. So I think that's good. You're constantly making decisions, which is interesting because the gameplay and the shooting is so fast paced. You almost feel like you don't have time to think.
Yeah,
So
the way you're describing all of that really throws me back to Enter the Gungeon, which I played quite a bit of, and it has the same kind of mechanic of like, yeah, you can take this elevator and start on whatever floor you've unlocked. But the same thing, like you won't have picked up different guns, you won't have picked up the different power-ups, like, and it's really just one of those like, hey, once you've played enough, you think you're good enough, then you can kind of skip that base level and still do fine. But it is a cool like quality of life option for people, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of player choice, and Enter the Gungeon's a fun comparison because that game is like kind of like a bullet hell as well, but it's in a very different style. And I've never experienced a game where it's that like third person, like close to your character's body kind of aspect for a bullet hell. And
I'm
I
not
know
sure there is many other ones like that.
no, and this game it's so neat. Like it is so cinematic. Like it's a good looking game. It's not necessarily the highest tier looking PS5 game. It's a bit of a smaller studio, but what they use with their art assets is incredible. Like it's kind of dark, especially the first area is kind of dark. It's got that spooky, ominous, like almost like you're in a haunted forest kind of feeling. But all of your guns and all of the enemies' projectiles are these bright neon colors, and they just pop so well. It's gorgeous to look at. And also it's very visually distinct, so like it's easy to see when something's shooting at you, which is good because it's very easy to like lose track of where enemies are in these big like open environments when you're fighting a lot of different things. So it's nice to have that very clear visual feedback, as well as like it's just a really gorgeous way to take the art direction. So I think there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on. I've got to say that there's a couple systems in here that I absolutely adore, especially as someone who's kind of a slower and more patient player, and that is the health and the adrenaline system. So part of the reason you would want to go back to these other biomes is that when you find health pickups, so you don't have like a potion or any kind of consumables that you really use. You just find them on the ground, different things like currencies and health. And if you're at full health when you pick one up, it actually raises your maximum health.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Which feels really rewarding because sometimes it sucks when you get like, oh, that enemy dropped health, but like I don't need it, and then it just sits there and feels bad. And so this kind of like rewards really good play. And so you want to try to be building up your health bar because it's definitely not big enough otherwise. So you need to be playing like properly to fill this up. And then it also has an adrenaline system where it goes up as you shoot enemies. It goes up to 5 different tiers. And with each tier, you get like a different kind of buff. So as you're playing, that will build up. But when you get hit, your adrenaline goes back to 0.
Right, so it rewards you for playing very efficiently and playing well.
Exactly. And I find that the balance is really good where if you lose your adrenaline, you're not screwed over. You don't feel like, oh, damn it, I'll just give up my run. Like, it's not going well. I've taken too much damage early. Like, you always can bounce back because it builds up relatively quickly. but then it does feel impactful still when you're at full, and it feels great to clear a room and you're still at 5, and then you get to like recoup and go into the next room. So I really like that kind of system, and I'm so thankful that it's not tied to speed like a lot of systems are, where it's like, can you beat the enemy in like this much time, or like, it starts to tick down and you have to build it back up and like manage it that way. Because I'm slow, I like to look around. There's tons of secrets and different collectibles to do. Like there's a lot of like alien languages you can find ciphers for to like try to translate things, and there's different um like secret rooms and things that you can find. So there's a lot of like rewards for being slow and patient and looking at your environment. So it's nice that you can do that while also not having it affect your combat. So I find it's like, go in, fight a room. It's an intense, crazy fight with so much happening. And it's like, okay, slow down, look through the room.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
repeat. And you kind of like get into that back and forth
It's
rhythm.
like a nice change of pace to take that extra time to look around, just to even give yourself a break from dodging all the lasers
Yes.
and all that stuff, right?
Exactly. And I must say, you mentioned the dodge, but oh my God, this dodge is amazing. You have the most beautiful dodge with wonderful iframes. It looks so good. You're like jetpack on your back, like shoots rockets as you go in whatever direction you want. It feels so good. Everything in this game feels amazing. Like all the feedback from the guns, every move you make, picking up a collectible, dashing, moving, it's so responsive. It feels like truly like a next gen game. And I think like I've never experienced something quite like this game. I am absolutely and utterly addicted to it. And one last thing I want to shout out is I just want to say that the controller work is fantastic. Being a PlayStation
Yeah,
exclusive now,
yeah.
like kind of
Gotta talk about
expected.
it.
You gotta talk about it. You can't not bring it up. It's fantastic. It's not subtle, and my God, does your controller battery die quickly? So take that into consideration. But it's amazing. Like you feel the Peter patter on the controller when you go underwater. You feel like when you swing your sword, you feel it go across the controller like a slash. Everything you pick up makes some kind of unique vibration when you get hit. It's got the alternate fire for the triggers, so if you hold half press to hold down, it aims your regular fire, and a full press aims your alternate fire, which is like a really strong ability that you have that's unique for each gun. But then it goes on cooldown for a substantial period of time, so you have to plan when you're going to use it. But what's really neat, and one of my favorite things, is that when that ability comes off of cooldown, because it's such a crucial thing, the controller actually has a unique vibrate and a sound it makes to inform you that you now have that ability ready to go again. And that's something I never would have thought to ask for in a game, but it adds so much, and it's so nice to have that feedback because the game is really hectic. Like the shootouts, you're moving around so much. There's tons of enemies and bullets on screen. You're dodging through these crazy patterns. And you don't have time to look at the tiny little HUD in the bottom to know when your fire is up. And you also are switching guns so consistently that you don't really get time to intuitively know how long it's going to be. So to have that like physical feedback when that shot is ready to go has saved my life so many times fighting hard enemies. Like I'm in trouble and that comes up, I'm like, ooh, get out of jail.
Oh,
Like
thank
it
God.
can it can one shot a lot of like the smaller enemies because it's a really
Hmm.
strong ability. So like it's it's something that like, man, the PS5 controller, we keep hyping it up, and for anyone who hasn't played one, I'm sure it's like, oh, it sounds like a bit of a gimmick. But like I do not want to go back to not playing with that.
Yeah, yeah. It's the thing is like I always feel when I'm talking to someone about the DualSense specifically, it's like I really want to hype it up. I want them to know how cool it is, but I don't want to talk about it too much because it's like then you'll build their expectations higher. And there's a certain
Mhm.
point to where it's like you will be let down by it if you build it up too much, but it is
Yes.
like extremely cool and stuff like that that literally adds to the way that you're playing the game is and like essentially replacing like a UI element is amazing.
I think so. Anything that you can do to turn HUDs off or minimize them in games without losing necessary information is so big for me. And this game actually, as a little side note, does have a nice little like HUD augment that you can do that I really like. The mini map is also fantastic and very useful. But yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
overall, like I can't recommend this game enough. It completely blew me away. This was not at all what I was expecting, and genuinely, like this, I don't know what would be beating this for game of the year. Like it's locked in. It's
Holy
August. I
wow.
don't care. It's locked in. I am gonna like spend every free minute I can playing this game. The only downside is it really needs a save feature. I think it's coming, but you can't save a run. You can't save mid-run, which isn't great because sometimes they can be a couple hours, which is a long time to just sit in one go. Or sometimes it'll be like, okay, I'm done a run. I want to do another one, but I only have 40 minutes. That might not be enough if I don't suck and die quickly. So
Yeah. I know that's a big complaint because it's like, especially with PlayStation 5 not having the quick resume stuff like Xbox, like you could just, if you were on Xbox, you could just like let it run in the background, but this is a little bit
mhm.
less convenient than that. So hopefully they patch the save in. That'd be nice.
I imagine they will. I think they've listened to a lot of feedback, and I think the reason they didn't have it was they didn't want people like save
Hmm.
scumming or like abandoning runs, and they wanted it, not to break up the flow of the gameplay, which is fine. But I think there's ways to do it where like you can't have multiple saves, or it just like
When you load it back, it
it
erases your
delete.
save or something. Yeah,
Yeah, it
there's a lot
deletes
of
your
ways
save when you
around
load it
that.
back. Like there's a lot of ways around it that give the same experience, but it's just inconvenient for some people who like need to stop playing and you're in the middle of a great run and you don't want to lose your progress. And so it's just kind of a quality of life that I'm pretty confident will come. But it is the one complaint I have with the game so far is that sometimes I stay up a little too late playing, which maybe would happen anyway. But it's easy to make that excuse like, well, I have to finish my run. I can't go to bed yet.
You can talk yourself into it pretty good. Yeah. That's
Exactly.
awesome. Talking to you about this, like I've always been interested in Returnal. It's just like I just haven't played it yet, and now talking to you, I'm just like, man, you know what? I really need to move this up a few spots on my kind of list of stuff coming up.
Hmm.
So I would like to try this out a lot. It looks awesome, and I have a feeling like this might be a game where we really unite on really loving it because I think it's got a lot of
Hmm.
stuff we both really like. So it'd be cool to see. Like, I can't wait to compare my thoughts to you when I eventually play it. But
Absolutely. You must try it. And I could not. You have to come over and play it. Like there's just no getting around that.
it's a deal. It's a
Everyone
deal.
I know, I'm like, when are you coming over to play Returnal? I have to show you this game. They're like, I don't know, like what's Return? I'm like, it doesn't matter. You're coming over. Like I have to
You're
champion this
busy
to
now. You're
everyone
coming
I
over.
know.
There you go.
Exactly.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I mean, God, we got a lot to talk about here. Let's move along. We played 3 different PS Plus games for the show here this week. The first of which, let's talk about them all. Hunter's Arena Legends, Kate. And I'd like to start off by saying this might just be the most generic video game name I've heard in the last few years. Like all of these 3 buzzwords are just, there's Rocket Arena, Hunter this, Hunter that. Legends is on every third game. Anyway, Hunter's Arena Legends. This is the PS5 offering for PS Plus this month. It is the Battle Royale. I guess it was on in early access on PC for the last year or so. So it's not like a new game, but man, you know what? This game I think has a lot of potential to be a lot of fun. I want to start off by saying like I don't think either of us had a really great experience playing this. And one of the first things I noticed when I logged in was, first of all, it took me a long time to log in, and I noticed like the server options. There wasn't a server for like anywhere near where we are. Like we're on the west coast of Canada, like Vancouver, and there's the closest servers like US East. And I just thought like, man, like this is gonna be interesting. And my experience, unfortunately, was like really laggy and hard to play. And I think you had something similar, right?
Yeah, my experience was the exact same. It is a shame. This was the one I was looking forward to for the PS Plus offerings. I thought it looked kind of cool, a different take on battle arenas, and I had the same problem. Like I got into a match and it didn't register half of the buttons I pressed. People were teleporting around, and I got one kill because I hit someone in the back when he
Oh,
was
nice,
fighting
nice,
someone else,
honorable.
and that happened to do it. And then I just got teleported around and died, and it was unplayable. Um,
Oh,
and
that's
I'm
worse
sure
than
this,
me. I got to
yeah.
play. I got to play. I mean, for me, I think it's a really cool idea. I mean, this game definitely doesn't strike me as like this is gonna take over the world as a battle royale. I don't think it has maybe the high level of polish as like the big dog like ones we always talk about. But I think what this game has is a really unique idea in the fact that it has a lot of NPC characters in there. So I get it's a battle royale. A lot of it's like melee based compared to a lot the other ones where you're picking up guns and different loadouts. And so you basically pick a champion like you would in any of the other games. And there's melee range. There's some support characters as well. And the thing that I liked about it was, or at least in concept, is that the other battle royales you're kind of going around the map, and the first kind of phase of what you're doing is you're really looking around for your loadout, like you're picking up weapons and armor and crafting materials, or whatever game you're playing has different stuff. But in this game, you kind of drop and you're already your character. You already have all your moves. You have like your kit you start with, and instead what you're doing is you're fighting. There's not just real players on the map, but there's also like NPC enemies. And so instead of picking up equipment, you're actually trying to fight these NPCs and level up and get stronger. So when you run into people, you have essentially the right power level to take them on. And I think that's really cool because, I mean, one of my complaints, if I was to have some about Apex, is that the start of the game, like if you don't really drop with anyone, you can spend, upwards of the first 5-10 minutes of the match, like not really doing a whole lot. And you're just kind of looking at the floor and picking up what guns you're looking for. But in this, it's like you're fighting from the start of the game, which I like a lot, and it puts you into a lot more of the action and skips a lot of like the inventory management stuff. So I think that's really cool. It's just unfortunate I didn't get to like try it properly essentially, but I think it's a cool idea though.
Yeah, I agree, and I think some of the mechanics are really cool too. Like it's almost got like kind of like a fighting game style like combo system, not as in depth as a proper fighting game, but like it's got like different move sets for different characters, and you have light heavy attacks that sort of seem to work into each other, and then you have various like special moves that you can do out of them. So it's got a lot going on. Like it's seems like it has quite the potential for like a high skill ceiling, and I like that you can go in either solo or like with a team, I think of 3. So it's got that potential of like putting different characters that work well together. So maybe you have a melee, a ranged, and a support all together, things like that. So it's got a lot of potential, and I was genuinely looking forward to playing this game, and I think I will give it another shot if they, add some more server options that work better for where we
That
live.
really
But
surprised me that they didn't have that. Really weird.
yeah, but yeah, just at the time right now, like because it's online only, like I can't unfortunately play it. So
Yeah.
that was the PS Plus game I was holding out for. So that didn't pan out. But I did play the other 2 because I promised I would.
Okay, yeah, me too. Where do you want to go next? What do you want to talk about?
I think, well, let's see, I want to know what you thought about the Plants vs Zombies, because when I was being so bold last week as to say like, oh, I'm excited to play all of these games, I didn't realize that this was a shooter and not the Plants vs Zombies tower defense. I didn't know that they had swapped genres.
I find that so hilarious.
I was a little surprised and a little disappointed because tower defense games were really fun back in the day, and I haven't played one in years.
It's really like a genre you don't see anymore.
Yeah, like I picture those kind of games as like, I guess they've all moved to mobile, which is why I don't really
Right.
see them because I don't game on mobile. But I always think of them in the like days where you played Flash games on the computer, and that's like where tower defense was big. Like I remember playing a Pokemon one that was just awesome.
Yeah, I remember playing like I had when I had my 360 back in the day, like I don't know, 2007, like when Xbox Live Arcade had just come out. There was like this tower defense I had on there that was probably so bare bones, but I just thought it was so cool to be able to like play what I thought was like a Flash game, like you said, but on my Xbox. I was like, wow, this is something that's so cool. But now it's just like the dime a dozen kind of mobile genre, which is interesting to like, yeah, it's interesting to think about that. Anyway, what did you think of the game, like this game, now that you realize it was a shooter?
Well, once I got over my initial disappointment, I don't have strong opinions on the game. I think this game is very much intended for an audience that I don't belong to. And so it's hard to judge it. I think it seems good at what it wants to do. I think it's really appealing for kids. There's a lot of humor in the game, which, I didn't really strike me, but I think like, for a younger audience, it's great. It's really bright and colorful. The shooting is actually like fun enough. It's fun to be a little plant monster that walks around. Like all the enemy types are really cute, the different zombies. So I think it's got a lot going for it. And if I had like someone was, like a niece or nephew or like a younger kid visited and like, perfect, I'm glad I have this on PS Plus, like they would probably get a blast out of it. But I really felt like I was not the target audience, and I just wasn't overly engaged playing.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I mean,
Mhm.
I think I was actually more into this than I expected to be. I mean, I played Plants vs Zombies on my phone back, like the original one. That was cool, right? Like it was one of those original
Mhm.
like hit iPhone games, I guess. But I mean, yeah, the humor is kind of what puts me out of this whole thing in general because like there's that guy that just mumbles over and over, and like some of the jokes aren't always great. But I thought this game was actually like really pretty to look at in the way that kind of Fortnite is. Like it's got that cartoony
Yes,
but 3D, but really nice lighting and vibrant colors. It was very very
absolutely looks
beautiful.
just like Fortnite. It
Yeah,
does look really nice.
really beautiful. And you know what I thought when I booted this up too, because I've never played the shooter Plants vs Zombies, is like there actually is like some tower defense stuff in here in the PvE mode, because I thought it was just kind of the PvP where you pick one team's the plants, one team's the zombies, and you each pick your character, and there's different abilities for each one, kind of like there's the classes like offense, defense, all the ones you'd expect, and you're picking your character. But there's also the PvE mode, which I actually found to be pretty fun. I played a little bit. I think it would be obviously a lot better if you had a group, but this one is it's the one where you're on a map, you have this tower in the middle you're defending, and then you actually get plant pots that are around the map. So you're not only just going through and as you're the plant that you're playing as and shooting the enemies, but you also do get to plant. I mean, it's not towers, but you're planting
Kind of like
plants in these
turrets
pots to help you out,
almost.
like different turrets. There's some of them heal you, some of them have ranged attacks, other ones are melee, or they can slow enemies down, and they have just little abilities you can strategically place. Like, okay, this is a little corridor. If I put a melee plant here, maybe it'll beat these zombies up. And then there's another pot over here at the end of the corridor, so it can see from a distance, and I'll put a ranged plant in there to hopefully do some damage and weaken these guys. So when they make it to the tower, I can just pick them off with like my character that I'm controlling. So I think it was pretty cool. I mean, I would imagine that there's some content there if you're interested in going through that mode and seeing the different maps, the different worlds and stuff. But I mean, for what it
Hmm.
is, I'm pretty impressed, to be honest.
Now, that what's really interesting about that is I didn't play those modes. That sounds much more interesting. What I played was the campaign mode because I thought like I'm just playing on my own, I'll sit down and try the campaign. And so that mode was a lot slower. You don't get into the action, you're kind of like in like just like a neighborhood, and you have to like walk around and like get quests from NPCs, and it's
Hmm.
like
I
walk
didn't
over
play that.
here. Yeah, it's like walk over here, you got to get to this area, and you do, and you fight a couple of zombies on your way, and then it's like, oh, you can't get in because only zombies are allowed here, and you go back to the guy who gave you the quest, and he's like, oh, well, you're gonna have to get a disguise. And like I felt like half the playtime was just like walking back to talk to the NPCs, and like it was just like a really weird like RPG kind of thing. But I think like just getting into a match and playing the combat and like what you did sounds way more interesting.
It was
Where
a
I was
blast.
just yeah, maybe I should give it another shot. But I
It
just
was
talked to like weird
Yeah.
plants that just it wasn't great.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was the same, like it was just like a tower defense. Like you had your thing in the middle. There was
Hmm.
a wave of enemies. You could see how many enemies were left. Then you'd get your 30 seconds in between rounds. Like, oh damn, they killed the sunflower I had in this pot, and run over quick and you plant it back in there. So because it's like a healing source for you, so you'd put that back and shore up your defenses just in time, and then you'd be on to the next round. And it was good. Like it was fine for what it was. I think that it's the kind of thing where I wouldn't be gathering my friends to play it every night or anything. But if someone was like wanting to sit down for a couple times and play this, I'd be more than happy to do it. It was fun.
Hmm. Okay. Well, that's the takeaway then. Play the
Play the PVE.
multiplayer PvE or PvE. Campaign probably can give that one a skip.
I would agree. Let's talk about Tennis World Tour, which is the last PS Plus game we have for this week. Here's the thing, Kate. I'm gonna be honest with you. I played very, very little of this. I'm really, really a big fan of Mario Tennis, especially the GameCube and like the N64, the OG
Oh,
ones.
absolutely.
Those games are so
Absolutely.
good, and I like
And
to
Wii
think,
tennis?
oh man, Wii
Hell
Tennis,
yeah.
yeah. I
Playing
mean,
tennis on the Wii? It's a good time.
yeah. I mean, Mario Tennis, I would like to think on the GameCube is one of my, like, if I had to challenge someone for money, like Mario Tennis on the GameCube would be a game that I would consider like challenging someone to, that I would give myself a good shot to really take them out. This game, hard as nails. I was so bad at playing this version of tennis. I don't know what the difference is, other than this is obviously a lot more realistic. And I mean, aiming the shots was kind of tough. I found like timing, hitting the ball right was kind of tough. I don't know if you had this experience, but for me, it was like, wow, I got humbled in the world of video game tennis.
Well, I had a really funny experience because you'd already told me that you found it really hard before I sat down to play. So I actually sat down just earlier today once I got home from work and I played a little bit. And I had the funniest experience. First of all, I just want to say that when you boot up this game, it's intense. It hits you with like tutorials to go through the menus, which
Oh
is
yeah,
like
right.
weirdly complicated for seemingly no reason. It has this like card system that you can use to like give yourself different buffs in the game, and it just seems like there's so much going on. It tutorials you to go through the menu, which is already kind of a red flag because it's a menu.
Yeah,
And
I
then
just want
when
to play
you
some tennis, man.
right? Like, how complicated is tennis? But then you get into the tennis match and you're like, wait, I don't know the controls or how to play tennis because it only taught me how to look at the menu, not how to play the game. So that's kind of already a bit strange. But anyway, when I went into the match, I was like, I'm gonna do a quick play first, just against the computer to see what it's like. Apparently it's really hard. And so I jumped in, and just as I was getting to the end, where I'd chosen the characters, who I was gonna play, who I was gonna challenge, and I got to the end, I was like, oh, do you want to enable cards or not? And I was like, oh, I didn't even look at the stupid cards. So I backed out, picked some cards, and went back in. But I guess when I went back in, it doesn't auto like select you as a player on either side, which seems weird because you think like if you're going in one player, like you would just be the player on like the
On the
left
or like
or
on
something, right?
the bottom of the screen because your opponent would be
Yeah,
at the top, right?
exactly. You think you just inherently be one of them, but no, you actually have to physically choose when you first get in when you're in the character select which character you want to control, and that's a choice before selecting the characters. So I just like hit A when I got in there because it seemed to have kept the same two characters. Like, oh, remember the settings I picked? Perfect. A, or like sorry, like XXX. I'm in the match. And then, so it was two NPCs.
You were watching tennis, weren't you? Yeah.
I was watching tennis. But it was really weird. I'm like, because they served. And so it came back to me and it came directly to me. And I hit the like button to swing my racket basically at the perfect time. Went back, came back. I was like, this is really weird. My character just auto walks to the ball. Like, that seems like a weird
It seems a bit like Wii tennis.
I was like, this is basically just playing like a rhythm game and just hitting the ball on time. There's nothing else I'm doing. And the ball went back and forth. I was like, there's no way this is it. Like, this isn't hard. This is just weird. I'm not doing anything. And so then I waited, and sure enough, yeah, my character like hit the ball back without me touching. Like, oh my god, I'm watching people play tennis. So I got back into it after that. Played a little bit. Clearly, I'm controlling now. I hate their menu system. Why is that the default option?
I'll tell
It's
you,
just two NPCs.
the thing is that's a classic sports game thing. Like when you play any of the big
Okay.
sports games, that's pretty standard actually, because you might want to play like the other way to practice, like going down instead of up and stuff. So they do. I can see what it's confusing, but like I've done that
Okay.
before with NHL. But you just kind of get used to it. Yeah, but it is weird.
Okay. Fair enough. I understand why you might want to swap sides, but it just seems like the default should be your one side and then you can switch. Not the default is you're no one.
Yes.
And you accidentally get into an NPC
That's
versus
true.
NPC
That's true.
match.
And most of the other ones do that. So you're right.
So anyway, so that was kind of a weird experience. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go to the career mode because I know that's what these sports games are all about. So I made a character. They look horrible. Like, there's no way to make an attractive character. One of the preset faces is just like a weird Mr. Bean face. And so that was the one I chose. And like, I had some braids. You can set your grunting, which is great. I chose my grunt, and the options are never, often, or always. So it's like, I'm Mr. Bean.
Right?
I'm Mr. Bean. I'm always grunting. I get into a match, and you're right. It's hard as nails. I don't think I got 1 point, and that was it. And it was off a serve. Like, I didn't ever properly return the ball in this game. And like, I've played Mario Tennis, and maybe it's not comparable. Clearly, it's not. But like, I wouldn't have thought it'd be so hard. It was on normal difficulty, and I got my ass absolutely handed to me. She would send the ball back and it would be on the other side of the court and I just could not reach it in time no matter what I did. And it was pathetic. And I was like, you know what? I liked better playing with the NPCs.
I liked it better.
At least there was an actual game of tennis happening and not just like one shot done.
Yeah, 100%. I think I would be happy if I returned, like half of their volleys like one time, it was a success if I didn't fault both of my serves and lose points that way. It was tough. It was tough.
So, yeah, I think tennis is very humbling. I mean, I'm not a sports person game. Clearly, I don't know what the menus are supposed to do. And I'm not a tennis person, so maybe if you're really into tennis, like, I don't want to say the game's bad. I don't think it's a game that's really great to just casually pick up if you're
No.
just like a neutral person on tennis.
Yeah, I would imagine it's similar to like if we picked up F1 or something like that. Like, sure, it's probably really good for people that are fans of that sport, but to anyone else, I'm like, what in God's name am I supposed to do when this person serves the ball so well? I don't know. Like, it's just something else. Anyway, yeah, PS Plus. I mean, I think it's a pretty decent month. The stipulations are you have to be either a Plants vs Zombies fan, a tennis fan, or live somewhere where they happen to have a server option for you for Hunter's Arena. If you're any of those three boxes, great month for PS Plus. If not, like us, maybe it's like, middle of the road. We'll keep it at that. But before we end the section on what we've been playing, Kate, I would like to finally talk about Yakuza Like a Dragon, because I've been playing this for a little while actually. Since I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I got the Xbox, this has kind of been my my addiction, as you would say with Returnal. I've been addicted to Yakuza Like a Dragon. Maybe not quite to the same extent.
Well, but almost. And with the parallel too, this is a game that I have very high on my list. And as a series, I am so interested in getting into. So I'm so excited to hear how much you love this game.
Yeah, I take full responsibility for your interest in Yakuza as well. I feel like I've done this to you, and I'm not going to apologize for it. So I actually, the first time I talked about this on any podcast was actually the aforementioned Loud Thumbs podcast that we were on last time. So I'll plug that here once more if you'd like to hear my thoughts from it over there. I'll go over a lot of the same stuff here as well. But yeah, so this is Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is a really good, fresh new starting point for the series. It doesn't have a lot of the I don't want to say baggage, but it's not as connected to the other Yakuza 1 through 6 that's kind of come before this. It's got a whole new cast. I think there's a couple characters that return at some point, but nothing like major. Like, this is a whole new cast. You're playing as a new character called Kasuga Ichiban, which I really like because Ichiban is my favorite brand of instant noodle. So instantly, he's even more likable.
Instantly.
He's instantly even more likable within 5 to 7 minutes. And you're
Let it cool before enjoying.
Let it cool. Yeah. But he's a great character, and he instantly he's so charismatic and ridiculous, but also has those really steadfast, like stand up for what's right qualities that I think meshes so well with what Yakuza's idea is, mixing, like I always talk about, like the brutal and terrible and violent criminal underworld of the Yakuza with the most stupid and nonsensical side content that you could imagine in video games. And it's like him impersonated is or he's personified by that idea. So I think he's a great character for the series, and a great jumping off point as well. So the story's kind of like the backdrop is he is a Yakuza member. He joined the Yakuza because he views them as like they're superheroes, but in real life, and he's really into the idea of like getting that status and being a good dude. And he's so indebted to the leader of his I forget what they call it now. Like it's like a group, like a chapter, like his family, his Yakuza group, right? Whatever the word is, I can't remember. But anyway, he takes the fall for a crime that he didn't commit, and he actually goes to jail for like 20 years. And that's when the game then picks up back as just as you're coming out of jail with him. That's kind of the backstory. And he's basically trying to navigate this world where the dynamics of the Yakuza have changed. Different people are in power. Different groups are stronger than they used to be. And he's just trying to hold on to like what being a Yakuza meant to be. Meant to him, like in the old days before everything's changed, well, he's been kind of out of the loop. So I find it really fascinating. And again, it's a great jumping off point because it does a good job of kind of explaining this world to someone if they've not played a lot of other Yakuza stuff, because he's also learning this as he goes. But of course, like the big change here compared to the other games in the series is that it is no longer an action game. This is an RPG. And to me, this is honestly, as much as I like Yakuza, I still think it's not an instant day one purchase for me whenever there's a new game. But I mean, this one was something I definitely was interested in for this reason. I'm a huge RPG fan. It's probably like one of my favorite genres. And I think that the way that they've implemented it here is really, really good. So like I said, it's an RPG, so it's turn based. You've got your party, you've got 4 characters, or sometimes less, what depending on what's going on, and they all have different classes you can have, just like in any RPG. So you'll have like warrior classes, healers, magicians, like any kind of class you can think of that you've played in like a Final Fantasy or anything like that. But they're all just skinned towards being Yakuza. So there's a musician class, I guess is a bad example, but for example, like the closest thing I have to a magician right now is a homeless guy, and he like to do fire spells. Instead of casting fire or anything like that, he'll drink some whiskey and then have a lighter and like blow his alcohol breath through it, and it burns people. Or there's like the support class, and the support class is a maid from one of those kind of like Japanese escort kind of bars. I'm not really sure like what they call them, but it's like the ones where the girls like sit there and the guys will spend a ton of money and like buy alcohol, and they chat with them and all that stuff. So you're like one of those girls is in your party, and her whole thing is like she can charm enemy opponents by like using her looks, or she can like heal her teammates by singing to them and stuff, or just the way that they do it is awesome. And it's the same on the flip side also with the enemies as well. Like some of these enemy names, I've been Snapchatting them to you.
Oh God,
they're
they've
just
been
the funniest
cracking me up.
thing.
Every time your name pops up in Snapchat, like this is gonna be good. It's gonna be Yakuza, and I'm on board.
It's just great. Like there's a few, like I won't spoil them, but there's some where you're going through and there's enemies that are dressed like chefs, and you go through and their names are like pressured cooker. It's like that's their enemy type instead of pressure cooker. And there's like mystery meat smith. And my personal favorite one is like there's a guy who an enemy type, they're like a janitor, and they're holding one of those big like mops you'd have if you were seeing your janitor going down like the hospital hallway or something. And he's called the purger of filth. And like that's his that's his
so intense.
class type. So it's just like hilarious, right? Really, really funny. So yeah, the RPG system is great, and they actually have a reason, like a story justification too, as to why the characters all have these different classes, because it really is just a bunch of people like running around. They're wearing normal clothes, like there's nothing strange about them, but the way they play it off in the story is that Ichiban has such a overactive imagination, and they actually reference him being like a huge Final Fantasy fan, that he views every time he gets into a fight as like everyone is in this kind of RPG world, and so they all transform into their different costumes and stuff when you get into a battle, and then when you leave the battle, it kind of seamlessly just transitioned, and they're all wearing their normal clothes again. And it's just really, really cool way to have an excuse to add more personality rather than just a bunch of people in regular everyday clothes, which I think is cool. Like they've made sense of it in the world, basically.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that's like such a good trend. Like with Returnal and doing like the roguelike, like why is it a roguelike? Well, here's the story reason. And I love that games are like justifying how certain mechanics work and just taking that extra step to like make it much more cohesive. And this sounds like the perfect thing for that Yakuza world, because it's so over the top and ridiculous in so many ways that like it sounds like it blends perfectly into the style while also just being like a really fun gameplay consideration too.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I really want to talk more about the battle system, actually. Like, there's just so much to it. And I mean, other than the battle system, it really is a lot of a standard Yakuza experience, like what the things you'd come to expect. Like you're running around Japan. You've got the same kind of ridiculous side quests as in every other Yakuza. You've got your mini games, management sims, all that kind of thing. You're doing a bunch of different side content, but what really makes it unique is the battle system. And one thing that it also has that I think needs to be shouted out is it has one of those Paper Mario or Mario and Luigi kind of action command systems within the battle system itself. So I think that's something that RPGs which are really engaging have, because you don't just pick your move and watch it happen. You have this sense of like you have to get your timing correct to get that extra boost of damage when you push Y just before your attack hits the enemy, and in the same way you can push the guard button, like push B just before you get hit by the enemy's attack, and you can do reduce the damage that you take. So even though it's turn based, you're still engaged all the time, and you can't really pick your move and forget about it. Is the way you can do in other RPGs. And yes, on top of that, there's even more timing based stuff as well. Like the characters in a lot of games, when they get into a fight, they'll kind of just stand on their side of the battlefield across from the opponents, and then one of them will run up, do their attack, then run back to their side. Whereas in Yakuza, they're kind of all it looks like a street fight. Like if you were just looking at the game and you weren't playing it, you would think that it almost was an action game. Their characters are all walking around and they're kind of doing their little moves and stuff, but nothing will happen until you pick something. But the idea is there's actually environmental stuff in this as the same as the other Yakuza games. So if your character has a bike at their feet, for example, when you push the regular attack button, instead of just going up and punching or whatever it would be, your character will actually pick up that bike and use it as a weapon for their basic attack. So if you happen to put in your command when your character moves to a certain location, or like changes proximity to another enemy or something, or you can actually have different effects that happen within the battle that way also. So there is an element of like timing. And in the same way, if one of your characters has an attack that knocks down an opponent, if you put your next input in really quick and your next character goes to attack them while they're on the ground, you'll do bonus damage. There's an incentive to doing your commands quickly instead of just taking your time as if it's time is irrelevant. So those two additions, which are not like staples of every RPG, I think really elevate this battle system to being really one of the best that I've seen so far. And I'm only on chapter 7. I should have probably said that at the start. So I think I'm maybe like a third of the way through the game, and I would anticipate, like, if they keep building on it and adding things that I've like at the same rate that I've seen so far, and like diversifying the classes you can get and the different enemy types and whatnot, like I really think this is one of the pinnacles of like what a battle system could be, at least from what I've seen.
Damn, you have sold me so much on this game. Like, we're gonna swap. You're gonna play Returnal, and I'm gonna play Like a Dragon, because everything you said is like, I already love the world. I think it looks great. I like RPGs, but I'm usually wanting a little bit more of an engagement with the battles, or at the very least, like something that stops the game from feeling a little bit dry partway through. So this like totally checks all of those boxes. It sounds like an absolute joy to like come across new things. And man, I'm so excited. I've got to put my vacation to good use, because oh my god.
Yeah, you do.
So many things to play.
100%. And this is like this. We were talking desert island games on the last podcast,
Mhm.
and this is so one of those, like, there's just so much to do, and you're compelled to go and see the side quest. Even if you're not going to follow through, you just want to see. Like, I wonder what character is going to be over here. Like, who could it be? It could literally be anything. You know, like it could be a guy who's lost his toupee and needs you to help him find it. It could be, you know, a group of grown men that like to dress as babies, and one of them might kind of help you in a fight. Like it just could be, it literally could be anything. And I'm especially excited for anyone out there that's never really played Yakuza and they're interested in RPGs. They're like, you know, maybe I'll check this one out because I'm not so into the action stuff, but I'd like to check out this version. Like if you've really been under a rock and don't really know all the weird stuff that goes on, you're in for such a treat. With this for sure. Like you'll have a blast. And the soundtrack also absolutely slaps. Like this techno kind of battle theme they have going on, man, it is like standout. It's really good. So I don't know. I have nothing bad to say about it. It's great. And it more than made up for playing getting my ass kicked in tennis for PS Plus as well. So there's more than one positive.
Right. Out of all the games we played, Returnal, including tennis, was the hardest.
It's true, yeah. I didn't even get to talk about the Suji decks, which is like another hilarious aspect of this. Is like a Pokemon ripoff. There's like a whole Sujimon professor. It's like they call every enemy in the game is like a Sujimon, which is I think it translates to like weird Japanese man or something like that, because all the enemies are so weird. And there's this professor who's like getting you to go around and study the different types, just like you'd be filling out your Pokedex in Pokemon, and they call it like the Sujimon professor, and the Suji Center is like where he hangs out. It's just it's awesome.
That's so cute.
I love it. Anyway, Kate, I think that will finish us off for what we've been playing this week. So why don't we take a quick break, and then we'll come back afterwards and talk about our favorite weapons in video games. All right, everybody, welcome back to the second part of today's show, which is going to be a pretty fun discussion, I think. We were talking about, hey, you know, what do you want to talk about on the, you know, for our featured topic of the upcoming show? And we were kind of brainstorming a couple things back and forth. And we decided on the idea it'd be fun to talk about our favorite weapons in games, because I think, like, between me playing Ratchet and Clank and you're playing Returnal and, you know, all the stuff that's going on, it's just always fun to kind of go through those games that have such a good feeling, like with their weapons, and talk about like what are the best weapons in the games we played. So let's have a quick discussion about this. In classic fashion, we've each made a list of the weapons that we like the best in games. And instead of going with a nice round number, we both came up with a top 6, because why not just pick the number 6? It needs some love. And so why not? Before we get into it, though, I think we both have a couple honorable mentions. So one of mine I'd like to throw out a shout out just before we get into it is the Killing Edge in Fire Emblem, because it's not even the weapon, but it's just it just
that
boosts your critical
weapon.
hit. You mean like the critical hit rate, especially like in the GBA Fire Emblem games, when you get those critical hit animations and like the characters fly around or they like chuck their axe up in the air, super cool, or some of the Swordmaster stuff where they fade in and out, and the pixel art in that is just so nice. The sprite work is awesome, and just getting to use the critical edge and like have that happen more, it's awesome. But then I thought like this couldn't really be on my list because it's not even the weapon that I like so much, it's just the animation. So I mean, that's why it's an honorable mention, I guess.
I like it. I think that's really strong. I didn't consider that weapon just because my mind didn't go Fire Emblem, but I totally agree. Those animations. The second you said Killing Edge, I was like, oh, crit animations are awesome.
Hell yeah. My other honorable mention, just to
okay.
get out of the way, if maybe we'll do them quick, is I just put in the Pokeball from Super Smash Bros. Because I couldn't bring myself to say like the Pokeball is a weapon, right? I couldn't put it on the list because it's not really a weapon. But in Smash, I feel like it kind of qualifies. And I just remember having so much fun doing those ridiculous matches where it's like, okay, item frequency maximum. Which item are we turning on? Only Pokeballs. And then we just have like hundreds of Pokemon just spawning everywhere and like tossing the Pokeballs left and right and like seeing who comes out. It's always like so exciting in Smash when you get a Pokeball and you're like, oh man, I hope I get one of the sick ones. Like Zapdos is going to come in the back and kill everyone. And hopefully it's not like some shit Goldeen or something like
so
that.
So you throw the ball and it's Goldeen?
Yeah.
You're like, oh fuck.
but definitely easily the best weapon in Smash Bros. History. So I had to throw it in there too.
I love it. Those are both fantastic picks. I've got 2 honorable mentions as well. These are both kind of like joke weapons because of the streaming list. There's like some that stood out and I think they're so funny and so clever. But my list was kind of a bit more serious. I considered more like gameplay considerations and game feel as well as cool. So I didn't really put any funny ones on, but I think both of these are so funny. I wanted to just give them a shout out. So the first one is Enter the Gungeon, the bullet gun. And so like you get so everything in that game is like bullet skinned and like you play as a bullet
gun
and like
puns.
It's gun puns everywhere, gun puns galore. But one of the guns you can get is a bullet gun and it shoots guns that also shoot bullets. And so it's just this like ridiculous like Russian nesting doll of like guns and bullets coming out, which I think is super cute and fun.
That's a good shout.
And the other shout I want to shout out is I think it's called Bane from Borderlands, and it's this horrible gun that just like yells, and that's the sound it makes. And so it'll just be like like, and it'll make like da 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 da, like someone doing a gun impression, and when you reload, it'll yell like reloading.
Oh my god, that sounds like I don't know if I like that.
It's horribly obnoxious, but what put it on the list and makes me laugh is that even if you turn your like sound effects down to 0, it still plays out. So like it overrides like what you've done to your settings so that it plays no matter what. And I just think the commitment for an obnoxious gun like that is so funny. And it's one of those things when you're playing online, like somebody gets this gun and they play with it for like 3 minutes. It's so funny. And then everybody yells at that person, like, get rid of that stupid gun. We're so sick of hearing it. So
that's
I think
you know what? I've played a lot of Borderlands, and I guess I've never come across that. Or is it only in the first one?
I'm not sure which one it's in. I don't know if it's a newer one. I haven't personally come across it. I just like know about it, and I put on my list only things I played. I technically have played some of Borderlands 1 and 2, so I thought for an honorable mention, I'll make the exception. But I've seen videos of it, and it's such a stupid like troll gun that. I
gotta look this up after the show. I gotta look this up.
It's worth it.
Oh man. All right. Anyway, Kate, let's get into the official top 6 for each of us of favorite weapons of all time. I didn't actually put my guns in order, but I'll try to like on the fly decide on an order for them. But I know you did. So why don't you start us off? What is your 6th favorite gun? Not even. I shouldn't say gun. 6th favorite weapon of all time.
So this one was kind of a couple of them came to me immediately, and some of them I did had some fun brainstorming. And one of the things I thought about was that I love bows. Bows are always my weapon of choice when it comes to any kind of like ranged game. And I thought like, well, what's my favorite bow? I want to put a bow on this list. It seems weird to not have one. And so immediately I was like, the bow from Hades is fantastic.
Good call.
I love the way it feels. I love that when you charge it up, it has that second of sweet spot where if you release right at the right time in the pull, it does extra damage. And I like specifically the aspect of Hera, which is the one where you can put your I can't think of what they're called. Those little like red crystals that you collect.
Oh, like
that
your
do
cast.
different things.
Your cast, right?
Yeah, your cast. Thank you. Yeah, you can load your cast into the bow, so it shoots and does the cast, and like there's so many interesting like build options you can go with the bow in Hades, and I love the way it feels. It's my favorite weapon in a game where all of the weapons are amazing, and I think it might be my favorite bow in gaming. So it squeaked in for number 6.
I really like that. I wasn't sure. I thought about Hades too, and I love all the weapons in Hades, so I had a trouble signaling any single one out, I guess, which is why none of them made it. But that's a good call. The bow is great. I personally would have picked the fists if I had to pick, I think.
I thought you'd pick the shield.
I like the shield too. I think I would need to go back and really debate those two, But so my first one, I guess I'll choose number 6 here. Mine is going to be more of a symbolic one, I guess. Not that I'm not a huge Mega Man fan. But I really think that the Mega Buster is honestly one of the best weapons in video games. First of all, it's iconic. He's such a storied character, right? Like he is really truly one of the classics, like with Mario and Sonic and all those characters, like very iconic. Mega Man, and then also I just really like how versatile that the weapon becomes, because it's not just the Mega Buster. You can also charge it up, or you can take the powers of all the different bosses you kill in the games and have all these different variety of shots. And by the end of the game, you're using some of them for mobility. You're using some of them in very, very unique ways, or you can manipulate difficulty of bosses by using the things they're weak to. And I think that over the course of the different Mega Man series you've had, there's just been a lot of different augmentations and cool implementations of like defensive, offensive, different uses of different boss gadgets in Mega Man. So the Mega Buster to me is just a very cool weapon, and it seems like endlessly fruitful in terms of what they can design for it whenever there's a new game. So for me, like I just think it's very iconic and deserves a place to be talked about, especially since we don't really talk about Mega Man very often. So yeah, for me, Mega Buster.
I like it. That's a great pick and a great way to like put tons and tons of weapons into one slot, because
yes.
6, well, we love the number 6 apparently. It is a little bit limiting, so I like you managed to justify a lot of things all at once. So for my number 5, I went with kind of an interesting one. I went with Anna's sniper from Overwatch.
That's a good answer, actually.
Which, yeah, it might be a surprising pick for me, but I played quite a bit of Overwatch when the game came out. Anna was one of my favorites. When it comes to shooting games, I often like sniping, and I liked playing supports in that game, and so Anna did both. And I just think it's such a cool and creative, unique way of making a support character that I'd never seen in anything before. And so her sniper is neat in the way that she can shoot enemies with it like a normal sniper, but she can also shoot her allies and it heals them. So you're constantly trying to like hone your sniper skills, and it's not easy because they're running around and doing their own thing, and sometimes you're just like, fuck, I'm trying to heal you, like please stand still. But it's such a cool and like unique way. I've never seen anyone utilize the support quite like that. And then just a small shout out too, that the first character I bought with like the currency once I'd built up enough in Heroes of the Storm was Anna, and she is a similar kind of thing in HOTS where you have to like aim your shot to heal your allies too, and she feels awesome in that game as well. So probably coolest support weapon of all time.
I honestly might agree with you on that too. We've been talking, it's funny you bring that up, because we've been talking like playing Apex about they need more healing classes. There's only one healer in Apex. And we always say like, man, why has no one ever done like sniping healers before? Like it's only Anna. She's the only one, unless there's some other game. Like there must be some other game that's got one, but honestly, like not really. So yeah, very cool idea. I love that. I think for my next one, I'm gonna go with the classic. I've talked about it before a couple times probably. This, of course, is going to be from Ratchet and Clank, Mr. Zircon, my favorite weapon of all time. Which is this, it's the little drone you can send out, which is the family of different robots. They're called the Zircon family. Depending on which Ratchet and Clank game you're playing, you might get, sometimes it might be Mr. Zircon, you know, some of them it's the kid Zircons or Mrs. Zircon, but there's always some Zircon representation there. And they are just the one weapon I put on here for humor purposes. And they're also very useful. So it's essentially a grenade, you throw it out, this robot comes out and he will begin to fight enemies for you. It's like basically like a companion that will help you beat people up and protect you and distract enemies. But they also just have these hilarious one-liners. They're almost like, you know, classic, if you would imagine like something cheesy Arnold Schwarzenegger would say in like a dumb action movie from the 80s, and they're like yelling these things out. He's like, the only currency I deal in is pain, and like stuff like that. It's just really fun to especially use them for the first couple times and just see these voice lines they have. And I just think the Zircon family is so well done and so well written in those games. And plus it's a very useful weapon too. So I had to shout it out on there. And yeah, go Zircon family. You're the best.
Awesome. I love it. I was brainstorming. While I was brainstorming my answers, I was also kind of like guessing, like trying to make guesses as to what I thought you would pick. And I was like, there's for sure gotta be a Ratchet and Clank thing.
Yeah.
And so I didn't guess this specifically because I know there's a couple guns in the new one you liked. I thought maybe you might go that direction.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not the funnest gun to use. It's just I think that the writing and like some of the one-liners, I mean, I could recite them all to you and read them, but it just doesn't do it justice. You have to hear the context and like, you know, play the game to see it.
That's awesome. And those kind of little details are the things that stick with you. That's awesome. Well, I'll go on to number 4, and this is probably my least surprising pick. I have picked every single trick weapon from Bloodborne because they're all so fucking cool.
You're putting how many weapons is this now?
Okay, I did pick one specifically, but I wanted to say all of them because there honestly isn't a single one that isn't incredibly cool. Like, I know that that was one of the complaints people had coming from Dark Souls, like there's hardly any weapons, but every single weapon like folds into or out of itself in some like incredibly cool way.
They're so well designed.
The animations are beautiful. Like they have these like huge move sets. Like they're just incredible. I love every single one of them. If I wanted to pick the Rider Plash as my favorite one because it's the one I used for my first playthrough and I'm very attached to it. It's kind of like a fencing sort of like stabby sword, but it's also like a gun, of course. But the one I think I will eventually go with is the threaded cane. I just think it's so cool and so classy. It's actually one of the weapons you can start with. In a playthrough, you get 3 options. The threaded cane is one of them. And in one of its forms, it's just like a normal walking cane. So you kind of whack people with it. It's pretty unassuming. Like kind of like a gentleman's like nice cane. Like Lucius Malfoy would walk around with one of these. But then when you do this like flourish and you flick out this like whip that's
like
concealed
Ivy from Soul
inside
Calibur.
the cane. Yeah, and it's like concealed inside the cane, and you do these like broad whip strokes, and then he like does this. Your character does this like clink with the cane on the ground and like conceals it back up in this fluid motion, and it's just like it's such a weird but like amazing idea, and it's probably one of the more subtle weapons in the game, but I just think like, man, that is a stylish weapon.
It is. I remember playing Bloodborne. Like, I think my favorite, if I had to pick, I really like Ludwig's Holy Blade. I think that one just looks really awesome. The way that little sword comes out and then you can pull that big one off your back. I really like that. I mean, I remember Bloodborne when I played it, and just like you said, the animations when you transform those weapons, they're so like solid. I played with the axe, and you can flame me all you want, people, for spin to win. I don't give a fuck. I beat Bloodborne.
The axe is a great weapon, and it like I consider
when you
that
pull
one
the axe out, it's like and it's like, oh, it's so cool.
And like when you swing that axe, some of the moves feel so heavy and so palpable. Like I thought about the axe. It wasn't one that I used, but I did part of a playthrough playing with it and just testing it out a little bit. Like, man, it does. Every single one of them feels like 10 out of 10. I can't believe it's number 4 on my list, but I put it as 4. Bloodborne trick weapons. They're so cool.
Yeah, they're great. They're great. Number 4 for me. Let's go with Blast from our recent past here, Kate. We've been playing Gears of War, which is something that we will probably talk about next episode. But I'd like to shout out the Lancer here. I think as the more I was going through and making my list, I honestly think this is just a sick weapon. I mean, it's a bit played out now, the whole Gears of War chainsaw thing, but honestly, like the first time seeing that, and even I'm imagining when we get to Gears 5 and we get to check that out, like, you know, brand new graphics, all upscaled and, you know, beautiful 4K on the Series X, and having that gun that's like, it's pretty generic rifle, I guess, but the fact that it's got a built-in chainsaw and like revving that thing up and just slicing through guys, and like the way that they animate, like them sawing them in half and all the blood and guts and everything, it's just like so iconic to me. And yes. I think that in terms of like, I mean, Gears of War, the original, is like kind of a modern classic at this point. Like we're kind of, it's kind of like nearly 20 years old, you know, like it's not like it's a new game. And I really think that from that kind of era of gaming, that the Lancer is really one of the most iconic weapons that I could think of. So I had to put it on there. It's just so much fun to do those chainsaws. And imagine that on the DualSense, if that was something that was possible, like if Xbox ever got some kind of upgraded controller thing, like I would imagine it would just feel incredible.
Oh man, I bet it would. And it holds up well. Like I never played Gears when it was new. Like I'm playing it for the first time with you. We'll talk more about it, but like even like when you do it, it's cool. But watching your character do it on the other, like across the battlefield from where I'm standing, still looks incredibly cool. And that's awesome. And I like getting Gears representation because we've been like really impressed with the active reload in that game, and Returnal has an active reload system as well, and it's made me like really think of Gears of War because that's as far as I know where it comes from, and like I just think it's such a cool mechanic. So it's nice that like that weapon as well for like kind of making that mechanic a thing as well. So
yeah, I mean it's definitely the most iconic weapon in Gears, there's no doubt about it, at least from what I know. I'm not like an expert or anything, but it's the one people know, right?
Absolutely. We'll move on to 3 because I mentioned Returnal. So I want to put the Atropian Blade from Returnal as my number 3.
Wow, and already on the list.
I know. I maybe part of it might just be the excitement I have playing this game, but I love the blade. It is so cool. So how this thing looks is like, it basically looks like a lightsaber, but if it was like a katana, and you only ever use it when you do that cool samurai thing where you do one slash and then you sheath it. So you can't like walk around holding it. It's just there's a melee button and you press it and you kind of like dash forward, which has iframes, so it's actually amazing. And then you dash forward and this like coolest looking sword you've ever seen that's like a red laser slices through an enemy. It does pretty good damage, and then you sheath it like an absolute badass because you know you only need one slash. And it feels so cool across the DualSense. Like the vibration goes from one end of the controller to the other, like to follow the slash direction. And it is so cool. So cool. The novelty has not worn off. I love this weapon so much. The guns are great too, and I considered putting one in, but when it comes down to it, I'm more of a melee than a gun person, and like it just looks so cool.
I'm surprised you're here to pick the sword. Like I would have assumed the sword was more of a secondary thing and not really the focus. So the fact that you would pick it is kind of interesting.
I mean, guns are definitely your main weapon. You don't pick up other melee weapons. You just have one button that's just the melee button separate from your guns. So it's something you always have with you instead of your different guns you're changing out. And it's kind of like an option you use at specific times. It can be very helpful, and then it also like, can break things in the environment. So it's kind of got its own place separate from the guns, and like you definitely don't want to like be meleeing a boss and like relying on it, but it is like so clutch at certain times where you're up close with an enemy. And the fact that it gives like a second of iframes while you dash forward is just the absolute cherry on top.
It's cool. Sounds good. Another reason I should play Returnal, honestly. That's the thing. Okay,
there are too many.
Yeah. So my number 3, I'm going to go with a game we recently heard about, which is from Dead Space. I'm going to go with the Plasma Cutter. I think it is a very intriguing weapon, and I love the way that you use it, because for those that don't know much about Dead Space, or your first introduction is kind of this reboot, is the whole idea with Dead Space is the main gun, the Plasma Cutter. It's kind of just this, you shoot this line of laser and it kind of goes in this horizontal line, or you can also flip it so it's a vertical line. And the whole idea is that it's actually not even a weapon in the canon of the game. It's actually a repair tool, and it's just meant to cut things. So when you encounter different aliens, you're trying to cut off their limbs or different parts of them to make it easier and to take them down. And you have to intentionally switch it from the vertical to horizontal to kind of ginsu these guys up and chop them to pieces. And it's really interesting because it adds like that puzzle element to what is otherwise like a survival action game, to where it's not like you're not only just trying to defend yourself from these enemies and these aliens and trying to just shoot them with bullets wherever you can and kind of run away. You have to be more intentional with where you're trying to hit them, and you kind of I'm going to go for the legs, or like they keep getting me with those tentacles, so I'm going to try and cut them off. Like there's just a bit more to it, and it becomes almost like a puzzle element to a game. So I just think it's very well designed, and there's obviously a few other weapons in Dead Space as well, but the plasma cutter to me is just implemented so well, and I can't wait to see how they make it feel and everything in the remake too. So yeah, plasma cutter.
That's awesome. That is the one. I even made a note for myself. I'm like, I hope he puts the plasma cutter on his list, because I haven't played Dead Space and been on my to play for a while, and now obviously I'm waiting for the remaster to come out. And that gun alone was a reason that I wanted to play it. Like, it's such a cool idea. I love the fact that it's technically just like a tool that gets repurposed, because like you got to use what you have available to you,
Isaac,
right?
He's a mechanic, right? He's not even, he's on the ship as a repair person, and he just ends up getting stuck in this situation.
Exactly. It's kind of like how Gordon Freeman in Half-Life starts out with just a crowbar, because that's what he picked up. He's not a soldier, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
I
Exactly.
love that improvisation element to it, and it's just so clever how it gets used in gameplay. And I really wanted to put on my list, but I couldn't justify it because I haven't played the game. So
that's fair.
you.
That's a good way to do it.
You've done me a great service.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, we're getting to the top two it's for hard. Each of us.
Now, there's one that's chilling out here, and neither of us have said it yet. And I'm assuming that we're gonna have one in common here.
There's an elephant in the room, absolutely, and I'm not gonna go for it just yet. I'm gonna leave that hanging just a little bit.
Okay.
So my number 2 is going to be the Truth Seeker from Divinity Original Sin 2. And this was a big one for me. Divinity has it's not a dungeon crawler like a Diablo kind of style game, but it has a similar kind of loot system where you're constantly like getting new gear for your characters, whether that's like a type of armor or like an accessory or weapons and things, and you get them as like quest rewards, and also you find them throughout the world exploring and from fallen enemies. So you're constantly like getting and checking loot, and they all have various gameplay considerations. So what's cool is they're not just base stats, but they also give you like various different like attribute points for your characters. They can give you like skill abilities, so like various moves that you could do in combat, like a certain spell, for example. You might have to actually like level up and like learn that spell yourself, but they can come like automatically equipped to a weapon, so you don't have to learn it, but you get access to that spell if you're using the weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of really cool stuff that the weapons do that kind of augment gameplay in different ways, and there's a lot of really memorable ones. But there's a few weapons in the game that are called unique weapons, and so they don't change attributes. Normally you find them and they're kind of randomized like a loot system would be, but there's some unique ones that are always the same, and they usually have like some lore behind them. And so the Truth Seeker is one of these. It's a little bit late game item, but it is basically this sword, and it gives you like extra accuracy, strength, crit, and an attribute called warfare, which is what one of my characters had, because he was kind of like our like big bruiser tank sort of character. And then along with the accuracy and the crit, it also makes you blind. And when you're blind, you miss all of your attacks. So it gives you crit and it gives you accuracy, but then you're blind. So it's this weird contradictory weapon that doesn't work at all. So
can you use it? You can't use it.
Well, you can use it normally, but I had a helmet on with my character that made me immune to being blind. So I didn't get the negative effect from it, and I got the positive effect. And it was just like, it's such a funny, like weird weapon that you come across. And like, I just made it work with this build. And like, there's so many very memorable weapons, and they really change like how your character feels in that game. And it's really exciting to be like, oh, like there's a sword for this quest room. We don't know what it is, but I bet it's something cool. And like, it just leads to like fun game moments. And so the Truth Seeker probably my favorite just because like I ended up making a really strong build around this like stupid weapon because I happened to have a hat that like worked with it.
It sounds good, honestly. Have you
It's
had that
it's
hat?
it was awesome, and it also has one of like the most badass quotes on the weapon because especially with the unique ones you get like a little bit of like a flavor text, which I'm a big sucker for. But the Truth Seeker says, "Do not trust your eyes alone, for only questions asked by the blade will reveal the truth."
Ooh, ominous,
Like,
ominous.
ooh,
Like I don't ask
damn.
questions. I let my sword ask questions.
Exactly. It's like,
Damn,
oh
badass.
man, I'm a badass, and I love, and this represents all of the weapons in Divinity for me, kind of like the threaded cane with Bloodborne. But if I had to pick
Hmm.
one, this is the one I'd go for.
It's a good shout. It sounds cool, and I like how it's like
Hmm.
because of your personal experience when you happen to have that build that it just is the one that stuck out. That's cool.
Hmm.
It's like more of a personal choice than someone
Hmm.
might play through that game and really not have any significant. They'd be like, "Wow, this sword's useless," but for you,
Yeah,
it was something
exactly.
else.
Or like if you build a different kind of character, you wouldn't want it, but it was just perfect at the time and just a very memorable, like almost kind of like role playing experience that we had based off of getting this specific weapon.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. In the spirit of keeping us connected for what will probably be the last one we mention, I will mention my unique one now. And this is one I was
Okay.
really gonna save this till the end, but I thought we may as well discuss the Leviathan X together at the end. Is that it? Oh, that's not
Bold,
it.
bold assumption.
Oh,
Well,
am I
give
wrong?
me
Am I
your
wrong?
other one. Well, you're half right. Give me yours and we'll go
Okay,
through to the
okay,
final
okay.
one.
So my second last one here is a very unique one. I'm honestly very proud of myself for coming up with this, and I think this actually might be my favorite answer. But I think one of the best weapons in gaming history is Soul Edge from the Soul Calibur series. I think because it's not only is it a weapon that transforms its shape depending on like who's using it. So if this character that uses nunchucks, Maxi, if he has the soul edge, they're going to be like soul edge nunchucks, and it's got like it looks like veins all over it, and they're alive, and it has this creepy eye that like looks around like it's a sentient being, it's a character, and it
Mhm.
changes. Like if you're Mitsurugi, the samurai, you're like it's a samurai sword, and it morphs, right? But I want to read you from the Soul Calibur wiki what it says about it because I think this is very interesting.
Okay.
And this is what it says about Soul Edge. It says, consistently referred to as the evil sword throughout the series, Soul Edge has a reputation for devouring souls. The weapon is also known to be a shapeshifter. Which form it takes depends on its current owner. Only those with great mental discipline can retain their will while wielding this weapon. Soul Edge is the central antagonist of the Soul series, and its namesake of the first installment. When originally forged, the soul was just an ordinary sword, but after being bathed in blood and hatred countless times, the sword turned into a demonic weapon and gained a wicked soul, which the game calls Inferno. Those who grasp the hilt are unable to escape its curse, as the spirit invades their mind like a parasite and drives the wielder insane. Its blade is soaked in blood and power, and it remains polished red. I just think that that's such a cool lore, and like the weapon is the enemy of the whole series. Like it's a character, and I think that is so ingenious to like personify it like that. And I just love that design too. It's like so demonic and evil, and it looks just
Mhm.
like wet or like
Yeah.
it was like picking up like a dead like body or something that's been kind of like you know what I mean. It's just gross. Like I love the design of Soul Edge, and I think it's just so iconic and so
Mhm.
cool.
I think that's awesome. That is a great pick. That lore is super cool. You wouldn't necessarily expect like that kind of, and I guess it depends on how like much the game plays around with it, but that's at least like a really cool like creative lore for it. And like yeah, it's weird. It's nice to have a weapon that's kind of like got a personality, and I like that it's like all these people are very strong. It corrupts people and like
Hmm.
that's kind of
Hmm.
cool. It kind of like it like it's self-perpetuating. It claims its victims either way, if it's you or
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
person you kill with it.
Exactly. It
So,
was like the main character of Soul Calibur, or one of them is like Siegfried, right? He's like the big knight,
mhm.
the kind of blonde guy. He's the hero, one of the heroes. But one of the main antagonists is Nightmare, and it's literally the same guy. It's just he's corrupt by the sword, and he's basically become this demonic force that has no will other than to serve this weapon. I just think that's such a cool like justification of why he's evil.
That's cool. I like it. And we haven't had any like cursed weapons yet, which is like kind of like a tropey thing to have, right? Is those like weapons that hold great power, but like they're evil or demonic in some
Yeah,
way
yeah,
and very
yeah.
dangerous. So like
I think it's kind of
that's cool.
like Devil May Cry has something like that going on. I think I don't know. We'll see. Anyway,
Mhm.
let's talk about this number one situation here because I think we may I may have been too confident that we had the same thing here. Um,
Well, so it's clearly come up, and you said we had a bit of a freeze, and so clearly I'm thinking you've got the
I
Leviathan
have the
axe on
Leviathan
here.
axe as my number one.
And let me tell you, we are on the same. We're in the same reading the same book, but we're on a different page because I put the Blades of Chaos,
All right, all right.
and I deliberated on these two for quite some time, and eventually settled on the Blades. But I think I like it. It's unanimous. God of War just has the most iconic, quintessential
Oh
weapons,
man,
and
absolutely.
tell me about the axe and see if you can change my mind.
Okay. So I mean, this is a debate, and I want to say first off that these were both very high on my list, and I honestly, if I wasn't going for like game variation, I might have put both.
Hmm.
But I just didn't want to have like it seems kind of a cop out to be like putting both of these and replace something else, so I didn't. And they're both great weapons, obviously, like God of War, so well designed in terms of these weapons. But I think the Leviathan axe, what does it for me over the Blades is that, and maybe it's because God of War 2018 is just such a step up from some of the older God of Wars, but I love the way that it is used in both combat and puzzles so well. There's a lot of times with the axe where you throw it off onto a target to open a button or a door or something, and you go through and you pull it back, and there's a lot of creative puzzle elements there. And what I like about it so much is it's got a lot of variation in terms of like you can fight with the axe, but if you throw it at someone, it's off in the distance. You can continue to fight without it, and then later like pull it back. And it has this kind of combo mentality that comes up where you can fight with the fist and the axe. And the other thing that I like about it, which put it over the Blades for me, was, and maybe this is just the way that I play God of War, but I found that when I was using the axe, I was a bit more intentional with the moves I was trying to pull off, and it made me think about what moves I wanted to use next and kind of the timing of stuff. Whereas with the Blades, I feel like it can get a little mashy at times, and there's a little bit less of that thought and more of just like the holy shit, there's a lot of enemies on screen and I better hit some combos. And so like just that little bit of difference in how it makes you play, I preferred the axe, but I can easily see probably why someone might say Blades. So I would love to hear your argument for the Blades.
Well, what you said about the axe is 100% what I thought about it, and I completely agree. I 10 out of 10 times will prefer to play with the axe than the Blades. I love the way the axe feels. I agree. I like that more intentional kind of style, a little bit slower paced, um, like focused combat that the axe brings. And like you said, throwing it out and pulling it back, and just that weight of it when Kratos
It's
catches
wicked,
his
right? It's
axe. Like,
wicked.
oh man, does that like that feels amazing. I 100% agree. I think the axe is the superior weapon when you're playing God of
It's just
War.
not as iconic as the thing I would say against it. But
The
I don't know.
chains are so iconic, and what elevated them to me, and I am going to say this as spoiler free as possible, is the story consideration of the chains and what they represent for Kratos and how far he's come as a character from the original trilogy into God of War 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And the axe is a very sentimental weapon for Kratos as well because it's from his wife, and there's a lot of good meaning for that as well. But the Blades of Chaos really do tell his story and how they come up in 2018 with trying to spoil as little as
Oh, it's
possible.
so
I
hard to
think
talk about.
it's so hard to talk about. I think at this point, like even if you haven't played the game, you kind of expect they're going to show up at some point, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
hard to get around it.
Well, I mean,
So
yeah. At this point, it's been a few years. Like
it's been a few years.
we
I
can't
won't
talk about nothing, right?
exactly. I won't say how it comes up or spoil because it's a very powerful moment. But that moment where they do come up in the game is chilling, and I think that's almost the defining moment of the whole game for me. And when you play with them, I agree. I much prefer the axe, but the way that the chains feel as a throwback to the original game, I think was
Mm-hmm.
done so masterfully to kind of fit them in that really like tough balance of familiar from the old games but updated to fit the new game. And I think like having played and been a big fan of the original trilogy and then playing 2018, it added that extra level to it that I think you only get from having an investment already and just seeing how much they've changed it, but also kept it faithful. And I have a very strong emotional attachment to what they represent for Kratos, on top of being a cool weapon that even though I would pick the Leviathan Axe 10 out of 10 times when I'm playing the game, I think at the end of the day, when it comes to it and I think about Kratos, it's the chains.
Hey, you're not wrong. I think about the chains when I think of Kratos too, and you make a really good point about the narrative and why the chains exist, what they represent for him, and like the struggle he's been through, and the stuff that happens. Like, it is very impactful, and you're 100% right about that. I really don't think you could pick wrong here.
No.
I mean, so incredible, right? And some of the effects too, like when you're swinging those chains around, and there's like the fire coming off and all that stuff, like, and he slams them into the ground, and things like crack, and like rocks and fire, what, like the sparks that come up. It's just really visually, it's immaculate. Is a good way to describe it.
Absolutely. I think when it comes down to this, 2018 God of War is a great game, and Kratos is maybe, well, I don't want to say the best video game protagonist of all time, but he's maybe the coolest video game protagonist of all time, because he's got the top 2 coolest weapons of all time.
That's true. I mean, that's a good point. Like, that's the most impressive thing about this whole list to me, is like, how come we can take the hundreds of different games that we've played and we both pick a different number 1 from the same game, or like the same series? Like, that's impressive. And that is
no
like
other multiples or duplicates.
Wow. So, that's true.
Wow. That, it was a special game. It's a special game, and I think a fitting one to end on for our show.
I agree completely. I agree. Well, if you would like to send us in an email, you can do so in several places. In one place, really. circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com is the email address. But if you'd like to get in touch with us elsewhere, we also have our Twitter account, which is at CNSPod on Twitter. And you can ask us a question or a comment, or send us in anything you'd like to chat about, just like our listener today, Kate. We have a listener mailed answer before we get out of here. So what's our question?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a listener mail question from Jonah, and he wants to know, what is the best and or worst game adaptation of another piece of media that you've played? So, for example, comic, movie, book, show that was turned into a game, which I had a lot of fun with this one. I think this is a great question.
It's a good question. Thanks, Jonah. And thanks you for being a first-time writer-inner as well. Appreciate always hearing a new name come up for some listener mail. Appreciate that. Send in as many questions as you would like. Kate, would you like to answer this first? Do you want me to go? What do you think?
Yeah, I think we can go back and forth, and maybe we'll do the bad one, and then we'll finish on a positive note. So, the bad one was the easier of the two for me, unfortunately. Because I limited myself again to games that I've played, and I hadn't played a ton of the adaptions. I know there's a lot of big ones like The Witcher, Metro, like there's a lot of Lord of the Rings games, like considered very good. I haven't played, so for my bad one, I actually picked the Game of Thrones Telltale.
Oh yeah, I knew I thought about that one for you, yeah.
And it was just so underwhelming. It was fun enough to play, but the problem is that when you get into a Telltale game, right, it's like an interactive story. And Game of Thrones seems like it'd be a great setting for that, because it's all about like character choices and consequences and things having these like butterfly effects that affect events, like way later down the road. So it seems like a match made in heaven. But the problem is that you figure out pretty quickly into the game that your choices don't actually matter. And I don't necessarily think that's always an issue in games when it seems like you're presented with a choice, but you end up in the same place anyway. I still feel like that can be a fine narrative space for you to kind of role play a little bit, but still have a focused story. So I don't think that's the problem. But I think the problem with this game is that it's presented as though your choices really matter, and ultimately they don't. So, like, for example, at one point you have to choose, it's like one of the first big conflicts in the game, you have to choose like who's going to be your advisor. You kind of play as like a fictional house made for the game, but it follows along with the TV show. So it's kind of set between like, I think it's season 4 and 5, like Ramsay's the big villain and Cersei's the other one. And it's cool, like they got the actual voice actors from the show. Like it had a pretty like high production for it. But you're choosing this advisor, and it's kind of like, well, do you take this hard-ass guy who's kind of a jerk, but he's willing to do the stuff that's necessary and he'll get results? Or do you choose the more like morally good character, but maybe when push comes to shove, he won't be able to like, like do what has to be done for the greatest possible good kind of thing. And so like you're tasked with like picking who's it gonna be, and it seems like this big choice. And then when you pick them, it plays the exact same cutscene regardless of who you've picked, and it has like their back is facing the camera, so like you can't see them, and like they don't mention their names. You turn around and like they betray you no matter who you pick, and they betray you to Ramsey, and then you turn around and like, you've betrayed me, but like they specifically don't say their name, so like it's literally the same cutscene no matter what, and it's like,
That's
well,
disappointing.
right, that was set up as a big thing, and then because it coincides with the show, it's like, well, Ramsey's the big villain, but like he's still alive in the show and doing stuff, so like I know nothing's gonna happen to him, and like it just felt like such a missed opportunity, and
It's too
it
bad
got
too.
canceled after the first like couple seasons were out, and so it just kind of fell flat.
Yeah, that's too bad because that is, like you said, like it's a world which could really lend itself to a Telltale style thing. It's too
Hmm.
bad that they felt a need that they should connect it to like the canon characters from the show. If they had just set it in that world, but just unrelated to anyone you know from the show, maybe they could have had some more freedom and like.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been cool if maybe we had like smaller references, but it was like, a little bit of a different story instead in the world, and they had a little more freedom to kind of let you influence things more, but it felt like they tried to have like their cake and eat it too, and we just ended
Hmm.
up
Hmm.
hungry.
What a line! That's a quote. We just ended up hungry. Okay, so mine, like I guess I've got a lot less thoughts on mine because I really don't remember this game that well. But my answer for this, I mean, there's so many horrible licensed games that came out in kind of
Absolutely.
like that Game Boy, PSP, like GameCube,
Mhm.
PS2 era. Like,
Do you remember
oh,
that Shrek game I
that's
had?
the one I was thinking of. Like, that's not my answer, but you had that Shrek Game Boy Advance game that was just
It
like this
was so
terrible,
bad.
terrible side scroller. Like, just I mean, bare bones is terrible. But anyway, that's not what I was going to talk about. I was going to mention this game that I remember renting one time from Blockbuster on back in those days, and it was the Lost game, Lost Via Domus, which
Oh my
was
god, there
a
was a Lost game?
there was a Lost game, and it came out I think during the third or fourth season of Lost, like when it was airing on TV. And I remember being really into that show back then, and I still am today. Like we're both big Lost fans. That's like some podcast lore right there. But I
Mhm.
remember this game coming out, and it's like, wow, we actually get to play Lost. Like the premise is you're this guy, and I mean, this is where the game begins to fall apart for me the second I think about it, because you're this guy, and similar to the Game of Thrones when you're mentioning like I'm this part of this plane crash. It kind of plays the similar beats of the story of Lost, and there's some of the core characters are in there. Like you see Locke and Jack, and Hurley looks like some Hagrid ripoff. Like the
Like
characters are kind of,
PS1 Hagrid?
yeah, like PS1
Like that
Hagrid. Like
meme?
the characters are kind of weird, but you're this guy, and he's like the premise of the game is already so wonky. Like you're another passenger that happens to be there, and he's got amnesia and can't remember anything about his life, and he's like learning it through these flashbacks. And I mean,
Mhm.
fair enough, I guess, but it's just already weird because when you sit down to play and you're like, well, this isn't Lost. Like, who am I? Why are these characters not doing what I've seen them do in the show? And like you visit some Dharma stations and whatever, and I just remember
Mhm.
you'd be running around the forest, and I'm one of these early levels, and I'm running around in this jungle and avoiding the black smoke monster, right? But instead
Yeah.
of him or whatever the monster is coming through the trees and like being like it is in the show, at least at the start of the show at that time, because you got to remember this is only season 3 or 4.
Right.
um the smoke monster is basically just like generic obstacles that you're avoiding as you're going through the jungle. So you'll like running left, running right, oh there's some smoke over there, like better go around the other way. Like it was just like this weird adventure game that was kind of just like someone had a concept of being crash landed, and then they decided to license Lost for it, and that's where they got the characters and some of these
Right.
lore
They're
things
like,
from.
"This is pretty popular, we might as well throw the skin on it and it'll
Yeah,
sell."
yeah, and it was published. I think it was like a Ubisoft published game too, so it was like big enough license wise. But I just remember it just wasn't a lot of fun, and I was just like, I would rather just play through some stuff about some like lost levels or something as Jack or Hurley or Kate or something. I don't want to be this
Mhm.
random guy who I'm not invested in, and then just have these minimal conversations with these other characters. So I mean, I don't know. I didn't play a whole lot of it. I was pretty disappointed, but I just remember for as much as I love Lost, being so disappointed playing
That
that
is
game.
that is so funny. I'm
Yeah.
about, I think maybe about 6 or 7 episodes off of finishing Lost for the first time. So,
Oh man,
I
we got to do
think
a Lost spoiler cast.
oh, we should. I'm so into it. But I think as a celebration for finishing it, I should play this
Oh my
game.
god, Lost Vedomus. I
Check it
think it's
out.
I think you can maybe get it on Steam or something pretty cheap, but I think it also has
Mhm.
like an up-res version now or something. And I'm
Man.
pretty sure it can be beaten in like 3 or 4 hours or something like
Okay.
that.
I'm
You should
I'm
look
gonna
into
look
it.
into it. I think
Yeah.
that would be I did not think they
Yeah.
had a video game,
Hey,
but that is
if
wild.
you do end up playing it, we should do it together because I would love to relive what my memory of that game was and see if it's really as bad as I'm remembering it because it
That's
seems
right. I can't
brutal.
wait to jump over the smoke monster
Yeah.
casually.
Yeah. Okay, Kate,
That's so funny.
what's your positive here? What's your good
Um,
game translation?
so I cheated on this one because I just couldn't think of one that I've played that I enjoyed. I just don't think I've either I don't know it was an adaptation or I just haven't played them. Like the big series I mentioned earlier, I just haven't they haven't come up for me yet. So I picked BioShock. It's not technically based off of the book Atlas Shrugged. But it is very, very heavily
Mm,
inspired by Ayn Rand's novel, centered on like objectivist philosophy and like like Atlas is such a big thing. They took a lot of names from the book and put them in the game. Like there's tons of references to it, and it kind of is almost like a critique on the philosophy in that book. About the whole
hmm,
like hedonistic kind of lifestyle of like the morality is progressing as a man and like what you can create and that's more important than any kind of like social stigma or social consideration of other people and like the whole idea of
hmm,
like rapture being built underground for like the best and most creative people so they're not burdened by everyone else back on earth and like it's very much like a critique and very similar to that novel and even though it's not technically based on it like it's very much its own story they do not shy away
sure,
from
sure.
this
Inspiration,
book
right?
and there's a lot of like yeah very like pointed references to it so I think the message of BioShock and the philosophy that it's got going on was such an interesting part of the game that I just liked it as an excuse to shout out how great BioShock is, which is funny because I read Atlas Shrugged and I found it like a tough read. I don't think I really like the book that much. I think it's an interesting concept, but it is like a slog to read. I don't think I love it. But I like
Yeah.
what BioShock did with it because it's interesting ideas.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. It seems like the kind of story that would be very interesting to read if someone rewrote it in a more modern way. I'm guessing
Well,
it's pretty old or like
it's a bit older, but it's
yeah,
also just like
very dense.
massive. It's massive, and you hate the characters because they're all selfish assholes.
Oh
So,
man.
you know.
Cool concept though. I mean BioShock, such a fascinating world, right? I love that
Mhm,
universe. I've only played the first one, but I mean obviously
mhm,
it
but
was
that's the
outstanding
star of the show, I
and that's the
think.
thing, right? Yeah, so that's a good answer. Although a little
Mhm,
cheating, so
a
we'll
little
let it
bit,
pass
a
up
little
because you put a lot of thought, so that's fine.
bit.
Um, Sorry to Jonah if he doesn't accept such an answer, but for
Let
me,
us
Jonah,
know.
I will save you with probably the easiest answer I've ever thought of for any listener mail. Look, it's Spider-Man. Insomniac Spider-Man is such a
Of course.
career. I just want to take an opportunity to talk about it a little bit more because it's so much fun. And this includes Miles Morales too. I mean, they're very much like the same universe. And the sequel that comes out, like, look, these are just such well realized worlds. And it's interesting to talk about this game a little bit now too, after having played a little bit of Sunset Overdrive on Xbox, because that game was the last one that Insomniac made before they were bought by PlayStation. And so playing that is kind of like the precursor to what they did with Spider-Man. There's a lot of similar movement options, and it's very much built around traversing this city and these buildings very quickly. And you can see how they had this kind of skeleton of a city built for that game, but then it's so much better realized, I think, in the Spider-Man games, and just the traversal and the way that the swinging feels between the buildings and the speed that you can build up, the momentum, and then swing down really fast and then launch yourself off, almost like jumping off a swing as a kid. But this time you're Spider-Man and you're moving at like 150 miles an hour through the sky, and it's just incredible. And then you're running up the side of buildings, jumping off. I mean, Yeah, it's just an unbelievable world they've crafted, and not only is the world great, I mean the combat is it's good. I wouldn't say it's outstanding, but the other thing that they've done so masterfully is the characters. Like they have made their own version of Spider-Man with Yuri Lowenthal, who I think is honestly like an outstanding Spider-Man, and the fact that people are accepting of his rendition of this in a world where everyone loves the MCU Spider-Man so much. I mean, because it's so easy for us to sit here and pick apart like certain games about like, oh, it's not like the actors in the MCU, right? Like with the Guardians of the Galaxy game, people were saying that online. Whereas with these games, like I don't think I've never really heard too many people make that comparison. So it just shows like how well crafted they've made this world.
And there's the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man to
Yes.
also compete with it, which is very, very important as well to recognize.
Absolutely. Tobey Maguire deserved a better fate. He did not deserve to put on that black eyeshadow and do the emo thing. He was pretty good. I liked him.
You know what? I like that scene. I will defend that scene.
Oh, man.
I am a Spider-Man 3 defender.
Oh, my God.
Because he's such a loser that when he wants to act cool, maybe that's what he'd think would be cool. And I could get on board with how goofy and dumb it is.
Oh my God! I think we need to end the podcast.
Well, we'll call it here. That's been enough from us.
You know what's so funny about that, Kate, is you're the one. For those of you that went and listened to us on Loud Thumbs, you were made the point on that show that you thought Breath of the Wild may have been slightly overrated compared to what you were expecting, and that's a pretty blasphemous thing to say on the internet. This might be on that level. This might be on that level. You might have just done it.
I'm creating a list of controversial opinions. Spider-Man 3 is great. Breath of the Wild's a great game, but overrated. Tony Hawk can go to hell. It's terrible.
Not the person. At least
the person. Tony Hawk seems like a great guy, but those are not fun video games. And if you have a opinion that is equally as controversial as mine, please let me know that I'm not alone and that there are more of us that exist. Or you can just get in touch and let us know what your favorite video game weapons are, any kind of adaptions that you've played and or hated, or just to, jump in with whatever kind of...
Tell us one of these stories. We've had some good stories on the show today. Tell us a story about how something that you think about video games is totally ridiculous, like Kate's opinion on Breath of the Wild, according to a lot of people. I don't know. Just write us in, guys. This is great. Like we said at the top of the segment, circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com, where you can get in touch with us with those emails. Or if it's easier for you, you can go over to Twitter and get in touch at CANDS-pod. That's C&S pod over there. So once again, thank you all for listening. Kate's got to go cool down those spicy takes, and we'll be back again in a couple weeks with another episode. So we will see you then. The intro and outro music for Circles and Squares was produced by friend of the show, Matthew Chan. Interlude music is from Scott Gratton of the Free Music Archive. Our channel art was created by @unreasonable on Twitter, and our brother Alex is the designer of the Circles and Squares logo. Thank you all for listening and supporting the show.